Captain Mike Rodriguez was just stopping for gas when he saw the homeless man asking for spare change. Something about the man's posture, his way of scanning the area, felt familiar. The homeless veteran sat with his back against the gas station wall, cardboard sign reading "Veteran, anything helps," but his eyes moved constantly, assessing threats, watching approaches. When their eyes met across the parking lot, Rodriguez felt his breath catch. He was looking at Master Chief Tony Williams, a Navy SEAL legend who had saved his life in Afghanistan. What the gas station customers didn't know was that the man they were ignoring was one of America's most decorated special operations warriors. Tony Williams, 52 years old, had been living on the streets for 8 months. The transition from Master Chief to homeless veteran hadn't happened overnight. It had been a slow, devastating slide that began when he came home from his final deployment with injuries that weren't visible on any X-ray. Every morning, Tony positioned himself outside Murphy's gas station on Highway 41, the same strategic location for the past 6 weeks. He chose this spot because it offered multiple exit routes, clear sight lines in all directions, and steady foot traffic from commuters heading to nearby military installations. Even homeless, even struggling with demons that followed him home from 3 combat tours, Tony Williams still thought like a SEAL. The cardboard sign was simple, dignified. No sob story, no dramatic appeals. Just the facts. U.S. Navy veteran. Anything helps. God bless. He'd learned that honesty worked better than theatrics, and his military bearing, even diminished by circumstances, commanded a certain respect from people who might otherwise look away. Most customers at Murphy's gas station walked past Tony without making eye contact. A few dropped coins or dollar bills into the worn coffee cup beside him. Occasionally, someone would stop to talk, usually other veterans who recognized something familiar in his posture, his watchfulness, his way of sitting that suggested he could move quickly if circumstances required it. Tony had been a Navy SEAL for 22 years. He'd earned 2 silver stars, 4 bronze stars, and more commendations than he could remember. He'd led missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and places that didn't officially exist on any military maps. He'd trained hundreds of special operations personnel, mentored young SEALs, and earned a reputation as one of the most capable operators in naval special warfare. But none of that mattered when the nightmare started. When the hypervigilance that kept him alive in combat became a liability in civilian life. When the VA disability system processes claims with bureaucratic indifference, offering medications that dulled his mind without healing his spirit. The final blow came when his wife, Sarah, filed for divorce after 18 months of trying to help a man who couldn't explain why he checked every room before sleeping, why he slept with his back to the wall, why sudden noises made him reach for weapons that weren't there. "Tony, I love you, but I can't live with your ghosts," she'd said during their last conversation. "Get help. Real help. Then maybe we can talk." But getting help required admitting weakness, and SEALs weren't trained to be weak. So Tony had chosen the streets instead, telling himself it was temporary, that he just needed time to figure things out on his own. That's where he was sitting when Captain Mike Rodriguez pulled into Murphy's gas station at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Rodriguez, 34 years old, was driving back to Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek after a training conference at Dam Neck. He'd been a Navy SEAL for 12 years, currently commanding a SEAL Team 4 platoon. He stopped at Murphy's because it was convenient, because gas was cheaper than on base, and because he needed coffee for the final hour of his drive. As Rodriguez stepped out of his truck, he automatically scanned the area, a habit drilled into every special operations professional. Gas station, check. Multiple vehicles, check. Exit routes, check. Potential threats. That's when he saw the homeless veteran. Something about the man's positioning struck him as familiar. Back to the wall, clear view of approaches, seated in a way that would allow quick movement. This wasn't random. This was tactical thinking applied to civilian circumstances. Rodriguez pumped his gas while stealing glances at the homeless man. There was something about the way he held himself, the way his eyes moved, that suggested military training, special operations training. When Rodriguez went inside to pay, he asked the cashier about the homeless veteran. "Oh, Tony? He's been coming around for maybe 6 weeks. Real polite, never causes trouble. Says he's Navy. Some of the other customers, especially the military guys, they look out for him." "Did he say what unit?" "Nah, just Navy. But I tell you what, something about that guy. You can tell he's seen some stuff. My brother's army did tours in Iraq. He says Tony's got that look. Rodriguez bought his coffee and a sandwich, telling himself he was just being charitable to a fellow veteran. But as he walked toward the homeless man, something in the back of his mind was insisting this was more than random charity. "Excuse me, sir. I wanted to give you this." Tony looked up as Rodriguez approached, and their eyes met directly for the first time. Rodriguez felt recognition hit him like electricity. The face was thinner, the beard was longer, the clothes were worn and dirty, but the eyes were the same. Intelligent, alert, carrying a particular kind of awareness that came from years of high-stakes operations. Master Chief Williams? Tony's entire body went rigid. His hand instinctively moved toward his waist where a sidearm would normally rest. For a moment, both men stared at each other in shocked recognition. "Do I know you?" Tony's voice was cautious, defensive. "Sir, Captain Mike Rodriguez, SEAL Team 4. Afghanistan, 2018. Operation Neptune's Fury. You pulled me out of that compound in Kandahar when I took shrapnel from an IED." The memory hit Tony like a physical blow. Rodriguez, young lieutenant then, bleeding from a leg wound, trapped in a building while Taliban fighters close in. Tony had led a 4-man extraction team through enemy fire to get him out. Rodriguez, Jesus, Little Mike Rodriguez from Team 2. "Yes, sir. Although I'm not so little anymore." Tony struggled his feet, and Rodriguez saw the slight limp, the way Tony favored his left side. Combat injuries that had accumulated over 2 decades of operations. "Sir, how are you?" Tony gestured at his circumstances with bitter humor. "Living the dream, Captain, living the dream." The conversation that followed was awkward, painful, and transformative. Rodriguez learned about Tony's struggles with PTSD, his difficulties with the VA system, the divorce, the slow slide from respected Master Chief to homeless veteran. "Sir, this is unacceptable. You saved my life. You saved dozens of lives. You're a goddamn legend in the teams." "Legends don't sleep in homeless shelters, Rodriguez." "No, sir, they don't. But sometimes legends need help from their brothers." Rodriguez made a decision that would change both their lives. "Master Chief, I'm not leaving you here. You're coming with me." "Captain, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not your responsibility." "With respect, sir, yes you are. You're my responsibility, my platoon's responsibility, the team's responsibility. We don't leave anyone behind, remember?" The drive back to Little Creek Naval Base took an hour, but the conversation lasted much longer. Tony talked about the invisible wounds of war, the challenges of transitioning from the brotherhood of special operations to the isolation of civilian life. Rodriguez listened with the respect due a senior operator, but also with the concern of someone who recognized that he could easily be in the same situation someday. "Sir, can I ask you something? What happened with the VA?" Tony's laugh was bitter. What didn't happen? Appointments scheduled months in advance. Doctors who've never seen combat trying to understand combat trauma. Medications that made me feel like a zombie. A disability rating system that seems designed to discourage claims rather than help veterans. And no one from the teams reached out? Rodriguez, when you're struggling with PTSD, you don't exactly advertise it to your former teammates. Especially when those teammates are still active duty, still operational. You don't want to be the cautionary tale. When they arrived at Little Creek, Rodriguez made a series of phone calls that activated an informal but powerful network. The SEAL community is small, tight-knit, and fiercely loyal to its own. Within hours, Tony Williams had a place to stay, medical appointments with VA doctors who specialize in special operations trauma, and a team of advocates working to expedite his disability claims. But more importantly, he had something he'd lost months ago: hope. The first person Rodriguez called was Senior Chief Marcus Thompson, Tony's former platoon sergeant and current instructor at the Naval Special Warfare Center. "Marcus, it's Mike Rodriguez. I need to tell you something that's going to piss you off, but I need your help." When Rodriguez explained where he'd found Tony Williams, the silence on the phone lasted nearly a minute. "Jesus Christ, Mike. Tony Williams is homeless? The Tony Williams who trained half the SEALs currently operational? The Tony Williams who has more combat decorations than most entire platoons? That's the one. And Marcus, he's in bad shape. Not just physically, mentally. He's been fighting demons alone, and he's losing. Where is he now? Guest quarters on base. But Senior Chief, this is bigger than just finding him a place to sleep. This is about a system that failed one of our best operators. If it can happen to Tony Williams, it can happen to any of us. The response from the SEAL community was immediate and comprehensive. Within 48 hours, Tony had been connected with DR. Jennifer Marshall, a Navy psychiatrist who specialized in treating special operations personnel with PTSD. Unlike previous VA doctors, DR, Marshall understood the unique psychological pressures of elite military service. Master Chief Williams, I want you to understand something from the beginning. What you're experiencing isn't weakness. It's not failure. It's the normal human response to abnormal experiences. You spent 22 years in situations that would break most people. The fact that you're struggling now doesn't diminish what you accomplished then. Tony's treatment wasn't quick or easy. Months of therapy, both individual and group sessions with other special operations veterans. Carefully managed medication to help with sleep and anxiety, without the zombie-like effects he'd experienced before. Most importantly, reconnection with the brotherhood he'd thought he'd lost. The SEAL community rallied around Tony in ways that surprised even him. Former teammates reached out with job opportunities. The Navy SEAL Foundation provided financial assistance, while his disability claims were processed. Younger SEALs visited regularly, seeking guidance from a master operator who had written the book on small unit tactics. But the most meaningful support came from other veterans who had walked similar paths. Tony joined a support group for special operations personnel, led by a former Delta Force operator who had his own struggles with post-combat transition. Tony, the hardest part of leaving special operations isn't learning civilian skills. It's learning to live with the fact that the most meaningful work of your life is behind you, that you'll never again be part of something as important as what you did downrange. 6 months after Rodriguez found him at the gas station, Tony Williams was living in a small apartment near Virginia Beach, working as a consultant for special operations training programs. He was still in therapy, still working through decades of accumulated trauma, but he was no longer fighting alone. The transformation became complete when Tony received an unexpected phone call. Sarah, his ex-wife, had heard about his situation through mutual friends. "Tony, I heard you're getting help. Real help this time." "I am, Sarah. I'm learning that asking for help isn't giving up. It's just tactical adaptation." They met for coffee at a small cafe near the beach. Sarah saw immediately that something fundamental had changed. Tony was still vigilant, still carried himself like a warrior, but the desperate edge was gone. "You look better, Tony. Healthier. I feel better. Not perfect, not cured, but better. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I tried to carry too much weight alone. I thought that's what strength looked like. What does strength look like now? Accepting help from people who care about you. Using the same tactical principles that kept me alive in combat to rebuild my life at home." Their conversation lasted 3 hours. They talked about their marriage, about what went wrong, about whether there might be a path forward. Sarah was cautious but hopeful. "Tony, I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I couldn't watch you destroy yourself, and I couldn't save you if you weren't willing to be saved. I understand that now. I needed to hit bottom before I could start climbing back up." They agreed to start with friendship, to rebuild trust slowly, to see where honest communication and professional help might lead them. A year after the gas station encounter, Tony Williams was asked to speak at a Navy SEAL Foundation fundraising dinner. The ballroom was filled with active duty SEALs, retired operators, families, and supporters of special operations personnel. Tony's speech focused on the hidden battles that continue long after the obvious war's end. "Brothers, we train to overcome any enemy, to adapt to any environment, to complete any mission. But we don't train enough for the enemy that follows us home. The enemy that attacks when we're alone, when we're trying to sleep, when we're trying to live normal lives after years of extraordinary service." He talked about the importance of post-service brotherhood, about recognizing that asking for help is another form of tactical thinking. The same principles that kept us alive downrange can keep us alive at home. Teamwork, mission planning, never leaving a man behind. But we have to apply those principles to the challenges of civilian life. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But the moment that meant the most to Tony came afterward, when a young SEAL approached him privately. "Master Chief, I've been struggling since my last deployment. Drinking too much, sleeping too little, pushing away everyone who cares about me. After hearing your story, I think I need help. What's your name, son?" "Petty Officer Williams, sir. Jake Williams." "Any relation?" "No, sir, just coincidence." Tony smiled. Maybe not coincidence. Maybe just the universe reminding us that we're all connected. "Jake, asking for help isn't admitting defeat. It's tactical adaptation. Let me give you some numbers to call." 2 years after Rodriguez found him at Murphy's gas station, Tony Williams received a letter from the Secretary of the Navy. He was being offered a position as Senior Advisor for Special Operations Personnel Transition, a newly created role focused on helping elite military personnel adapt to civilian life. The letter noted that his unique combination of operational experience and personal insight into post-service challenges made him the ideal candidate to help develop better support systems for transitioning special operations personnel. Tony accepted the position, but he also continued to visit Murphy's gas station once a month, not because he needed charity, but because he wanted to check on other veterans who might be struggling. He wanted to make sure that no one else fell through the cracks the way he had. On his monthly visits, Tony would buy coffee and snacks for whoever was outside asking for help. But more importantly, he would talk to them, assess their needs, connect them with resources, and sometimes just listen to their stories. During one visit, he met a young Marine veteran named Carlos who had been living in his car for 2 weeks. "Brother, what's your story?" "Same old story, I guess. Can't find work. Can't afford rent. Can't seem to get my head straight since I got back from Syria." Tony handed Carlos a business card. "Carlos, I want you to call this number tomorrow. Tell them Tony Williams referred you. They'll help you find housing, help you navigate the VA system, help you find work." "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because 5 years ago, I was sleeping behind the same gas station. Because someone helped me when I needed it most. Because we don't leave anyone behind." The transformation of Tony Williams from homeless veteran to advocate for transitioning service members became a model for addressing the challenges faced by special operations personnel. His story was featured in military publications, veteran organizations, and policy discussions about improving support for elite warriors transitioning to civilian life. But the most important impact wasn't in headlines or policy papers. It was in the individual lives changed by his example. Young SEALs who learned that seeking help was a sign of strength, veterans who found hope in his story, and a community that recognized the ongoing responsibility to care for those who serve in the shadows. Captain Mike Rodriguez, now a commander, often reflects on that chance encounter at the gas station. He uses Tony's story when training his own SEALs about the importance of post-service planning and maintaining connections with teammates after leaving active duty. Gentlemen, Master Chief Williams is a reminder that the war doesn't end when you come home. It just changes theaters. And just like any other operation, you need intelligence, you need support, and you need teammates who have your back. The mission continues, even after the uniform comes off. Today, Tony Williams wakes up every morning at 0500, not because he's homeless and needs to find a safe place to spend the day, but because discipline and purpose have returned to his life. He works with transitioning special operations personnel. He speaks at veteran events, and he advocates for better mental health resources for elite military personnel. But most importantly, he's no longer fighting alone. He has his brotherhood back, he has meaningful work, and he has hope for the future. Sarah moved back in 6 months ago, and they're talking about renewing their vows. The cardboard sign that once read "Veteran, Anything Helps" is now framed in Tony's office, next to his silver stars and bronze stars. It serves as a reminder that heroes can fall, but they can also rise again when their brothers refuse to leave them behind. Sometimes the most important rescues happen not in combat zones, but in gas station parking lots. Sometimes the most significant battles are fought not against foreign enemies, but against the invisible wounds of war. And sometimes the greatest act of brotherhood isn't charging into enemy fire, but stopping to recognize a fellow warrior who needs help. The SEAL ethos states, "I will never quit. I will never fail. I will never leave a fallen comrade." Tony Williams learned that this promise extends far beyond the battlefield. It reaches into homeless shelters, VA waiting rooms, and gas station parking lots where forgotten heroes wait for someone to remember that they're worth saving. We all walk past people every day who might be carrying stories of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. The homeless veteran outside the grocery store, the quiet janitor in our office building, the elderly man sitting alone in the park. They might be heroes whose valor has gone untold, whose service has been forgotten, whose struggles have been ignored. Tony Williams' story reminds us to look beyond appearances, to recognize that circumstances don't define character, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply acknowledge the humanity and dignity of those who served our country, regardless of their current situation. Because true brotherhood doesn't end when the mission is over. It extends into civilian life, into the challenges of peace, into the ongoing battle to ensure that those who serve in our name are never forgotten, never abandoned, and never left to fight alone. The next time you see someone asking for help, remember Tony Williams. Remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and that sometimes the most important act of service is simply stopping to see another person's story, to offer help without judgment, and to remember that we're all just one crisis away from needing someone to refuse to leave us behind.